Did you know that the technology to identify dwarfism in unborn children already exists? I know this is true because my wife and I have used it twice. Now, I'm 46 years into the research of a white male with dwarfism. I'm 23 years into living with a white female with dwarfism, and I'm 13 years into the research as a parent with dwarfism of children with dwarfism. This is the world debut of the results of my work. When my wife and I were starting to tell people that we were pregnant and getting ready to have a baby, we got asked this one question that we kind of thought was odd. People would say, do you want a dwarf baby or do you want a tall baby? And we had two answers to the baby question. The first one we said silently in our heads, and it went something like, since when is it any of your business what kind of baby we want? And the second one we said out loud, and it went something like, well, we want a healthy baby, one that isn't in and out of the hospital for the first year or two of their life. And that's what we got. Our daughter was born with the same type of dwarfism we have, and she only goes to the doctor for shots and checkups. And our son was born about 3 years later, and the same type of dwarfism, and also healthy and out of the hospital. There's a picture of them both. Now, my family and I have a lot of differences about us, and that we have more than other people. And the one that you see is the most important, because dwarfism is part of the diversity of human beings, and it deserves to be included. Now think about that baby question and having your parents get asked what kind of baby they wanted before you showed up. What do you think their answer would have been? There was certainly no one asking my parents this question before I showed up, because both my parents are average height. I like to say that the first two research assistants in this study of dwarfism of mine were a male named Tom and a female named Faith. These are my parents. I joked that my dad, who stood 6 feet tall, had this very important question for me, his firstborn child. Will you ever be able to ride a bike? Well, Dad, the answer is yes. I love riding my bike, and apparently you must have too. And my mom at 5'8" had a more practical question. Will you ever grow into the size of your head? Well, Mom, that's a hard no, but I like to tell people that it's because I have a big brain. Now, there was a direction shift for my parents when I was 6 months old. They got a new pediatrician who looked up achondroplasia, which is the type of dwarfism I have, in a book, and he wanted to find out what it was. He did, and then he gave them this sound advice. Raise him like you would any other kid. So my parents, my average height brother who you see on my mom's back in that picture, and the rest of my average height family all learned a little something new about how dwarfism shows up. They accepted me, and we moved on. Now, the next experiment we ran with my dwarfism was at the beginning of my 2nd grade year. We were in a new town. It was a new school. I walked into the room, and I was like, oh, when did all these kids get so tall? But luckily, my peers accepted me. But my research assistant, Mom, tells me that the teacher was unsure of how to adapt to my physical presence. When it was discovered that I could not reach the light switch in the bathroom, she came up with this innovative idea. Let's assign Ethan a bathroom buddy who he'll have to go get every time he needs to relieve himself. Now, my parental unit caught wind of this adaptation, and they declared it unacceptable. No, let's figure something else out. So, through the technologic breakthrough of attaching a stick to the light switch, we had a solution. Now, the second round of innovation and adaptation came when I was 16 years old. My parents and I, the only dwarf in the family, had to figure out how I was going to drive the family car. So with the help of innovative people around us and with the help of innovative people before us, we did. In my 30 years of independent living, I've had multiple pedal extenders on cars, I've had footstools, I've had ladders, I've even had a couple extra tools to reach switches. It's my dwarfism and the dwarfism around that other dwarfism has that forces us and the people around us to be more innovative, more creative, and to adapt. That's what differences do. And that is a very important part for humanity's survival. Now that we've learned how to live with it, I wanted to start researching how dwarfism brings us all together. And I've discovered that it does this by being accepted on a global scale. Once upon a time, the International Astronomical Union voted to demote Pluto to a dwarf planet. I immediately sent out an email to all of my friends wondering since when becoming a dwarf was a demotion. And I had a Halloween costume for that year. Some of you have even gone ahead and put dwarfism in man's best friend. I give you the corgi. That is a cute dwarf dog. Even I had dwarf blueberry bushes in my backyard for a few years, and you Game of Thrones fans know exactly who I am talking about. And so being accepted in planets and plants and dogs and on TV is one thing, but how does dwarfism do it on a global scale with people? Here's how. When we talk about different races and different cultures having to go through different things because they're the minority, I can raise my hand in agreement. I am the minority wherever I go on this planet. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing because I can walk into any neighborhood. I can not worry about blending in. I can start a conversation, and I can broaden people's perspective about differences. And people of different races and cultures will always talk to me if I talk to them first. Now, I have successfully conducted these sociological experiments with people from 6 continents. Now, I'm really hoping a scientist will call me from Antarctica, because then I'll have all 7. Now, I know that not all my experiments have been successful. The creation of stigma and stereotypes and bias around people with dwarfism can sometimes make the work very challenging. And I know that issues of race are far more visceral and run far deeper than my dwarfism ever will. And I know this because I love doing research and I wanted to find out something that people tell me. They will say that calling a person with dwarfism the M word, which is midget, which is a word we don't like, is the same as calling a black person the N word. And it's not. It's not even close. I know this because I've done the research with friends of mine by interviewing them who were both black and dwarf. And they would say, Ethan, we don't like the M word, but the N word may be lethal. And there are a lot of people that don't know a thing about what the people of color in our dwarf community go through. There are a lot of people that don't know about the dwarf community, period. And that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out how we get accepted with the people that we work with. It actually took, there was an advertising guy at work who had seen a television show where people with dwarfism were letting themselves be rented to appear at parties. When he came into my office, he sat down and he said, Ethan, does this really happen? Has this ever happened to you? And when I said yes, he immediately asked me to join the diversity council for our school district. And in those meetings, a lot of race issues came up. And I can say that as a white dwarf male It is very hard to raise your hand when an average height black man asks, has anyone gone through something like this? But I have. And in that moment, I was afraid of being accepted. But we had a conversation, and that changed. That's the problem. Society right now, we're not having these conversations. We're losing all the tone and inflection and emotion in the words that we exchange with each other. And when we lose those, our communication skills get worse. And if our communication skills get worse, that is fertile ground for fear. And I know that fear is a powerful deterrent. Fear is what keeps us from figuring out why dwarfism is worth keeping around in the first place. Fear certainly is why we don't get accepted some places, and fear doesn't see us as a resource. In fact, I've come up with a name for this fear. I call it Achondrophobia. And I'm hoping that this talk helps you get over it. No, really. Please get over it. The reason I want you to get over it is because I think, and through the research I've done, that dwarfism is one of the most underused resources on the planet. We are amazing communicators. There was even a real scientific study done once where they were studying babies with achondroplasia and trying to figure out why they were so social, so gregarious, and so much more outgoing than babies with other types of dwarfism. And I meet these babies when they grow up. And they become adults, and they're social, they're gregarious, they're outgoing, they're fantastic communicators. And I'm willing to bet that if we were willing to study this achondroplasia, we could identify something, we could train it, and we could use it to help humanity correct the direction that we're going in right now. And it could be done on a global scale. It doesn't seem like we're interested in doing that kind of research, though. But we should be. Instead, scientists are creating drugs that bet you won't be afraid of me if I'm a little bit taller and I look a little different. They're giving those drugs to the babies with dwarfism, and the babies are getting taller. Now, I understand when a kid is a little apprehensive about seeing us. I mean, we have a funky orthopedic setup. Come on. And my favorite story is the one kid whose brain is in overdrive. This is a kid you may know, a future scientist, a future neurosurgeon or space pilot, and they don't accept the answer that I'm a little person when the adult gives it to them. And the reason they don't accept it is because the adult has told the child the reason I'm little is because I'm little. It doesn't make any sense. And that's when I hear, I know he's whittle. Why is he whittle? It's a logic argument from a 5-year-old, and it's an awesome thing to be a part of. It's awesome because they really want to know why. And the best day is when the adult brings me into the conversation, because then the adult and the child both move on and know why. It's the kids that aren't allowed to ask questions, and who grow up that are still afraid and they become adults, those are the ones that concern me. Because those are the ones that are probably giving their dwarf children drugs to grow. And here's the difference. Did you know that my wife and I can have average height kids? Have you watched enough reality show television to figure that out? It wouldn't have mattered if both of our kids were average height or purple with pink spots. What were we going to do? Give them dwarfing drugs so that they'd be more like us? No. There's some sage advice in my family. Raise them like you would any other kid. Parenting is fun. Parenting is challenging, but parenting is fun. Society is the one that makes it difficult. And I know that dwarfism can come with a host of issues. It can have skeletal and respiratory problems, but guess what? It needs technologic and innovative ways to correct it. So my research has brought me to this conclusion. It's society that concerns me right now. How scared we've become at just talking to each other about race or disability or politics or gender or education or technology. We don't talk to each other hardly at all anymore. Typing it on your phone or posting it is not the same thing. We can already, thanks. Yeah, I agree. It's not the same thing. Because here's the difference. We can already find achondroplasia in unborn children. I know this is true because we've done it twice. There it is. Pharmaceutical companies are creating drug therapies so that children with achondroplasia grow and don't look like me. If a couple goes through in vitro fertilization and they get a baby that has achondroplasia, they don't have to pick it. And as this CRISPR technology develops, the one that can make genetic modifications to human embryos, including our reproductive cells like sperm and eggs, as that develops, imagine a cocktail party of the future. That turns to the designer babies. People may opt to get rid of dwarfism altogether. And we're so rare that humanity might not even notice we're gone until it's too late. I speculate that humanity is trying to get rid of dwarfism. And I propose that we're making a huge mistake. Because there's one thing we don't want dwarfism to be called: extinct. That's why we need talks like this one. Permission to say it's okay, we don't know everything, and by golly, we've got some questions. Take your cue from children. Better yet, take the cue from when you were a child yourself. When we saw someone who was different than we were, we asked a very simple question: why is that person different? Hoping that someone would give us an answer that makes sense. We all meet people who are different than we are every single day, and that is a great thing. Differences drive innovation, differences promote acceptance, and differences are certainly a resource for humanity. Because if not, then dwarfism really will become a scientific research project. And we'll have to ask ourselves, how did this one profound physical difference caused by one simple genetic mutation become the sentinel, the warning for the downfall of diversity in human beings? Because if we decide that dwarfism isn't valuable enough in humanity to keep it around and we get rid of it, then I truly worry for all of us. Because then we'll have to ask the question, which one of our differences will be next? Thank you.